because I'm going first in the presentation.
Okay, that makes sense. We know each other for a very long time.
I used to send him on assignment, that's why.
That's true, and we first met hiding behind a car opposite Madison Square Garden in 1911 or so, and just hiding because somebody was firing shots out the front door. It was nice to meet you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, looking back on that day and the photographs that not just myself, but so many of my peers at my former employer and so many other journalists and citizen journalists took that day, I don't think I look at that as any other day different than any other day. I think as a photojournalist, I go out with two things in mind. Number one, I want to tell the truth with my images. And number two, I want to record history in some way, whether the history is a spelling bee at a local junior high school, or an athletic competition out on a track, or two planes intentionally flown into two towers that changed the world as we know it. So for myself as an award-winning news photographer who used to sleep with a scanner on, whose pager would go off all night long, and I'd go dashing out of bed to fires and shootings and stabbings and other horrible acts of human nature, September 11th was the day I stopped chasing news. It was every natural and unnatural disaster rolled into one, and the desire to keep photographing people at the worst moments in their life just dissipated after that day for me.
I second to what David says, and that being journalists and photographers, we're first responders. And it gets to be, I don't chase as much about news as David has. I have in my career, of course. We used to ride along at night to different things and with the scanners in the car and stuff around New York. But September 11th has changed me a lot in that I'm very aware of things flying in the air. I see airplanes. I mean, not that I think I see airplanes, I see them out of the corner of my eye, and I will always look up and take a look, and it's just there. It's just something that's like a natural response, and I guess I have this PTSD. The night that, after September 11th, the evening of September 11th, one of our photographers who lived in New Jersey came to my house and stayed overnight, and my wife said that at dinner that night that we didn't talk about what we had photographed that day. We talked about f-stops and whatever, but nothing about September 11th. So I guess that's part of the trend and part of our coping mechanism for the whole thing. It's really interesting how it has, I guess, maybe with you as well.
Yeah.
So
I think the whole community meaning journalists, photographers, editors, writers, reporters, anybody who covered that day has their own memory that will trigger a very visceral gut reaction. You know, for one photographer after September 11th, they were driving across the Throgs Neck Bridge in New York, and if you ever gone across the Throgs Neck, many planes that are going in on final approach to LaGuardia come in kind of low. And a photographer stopped their car and just said, I can't go across this bridge. One of my coworkers had a stroke. He was a Vietnam veteran, and I think combined with every experience that he re-triggered from Vietnam on September 11th, I think that was, you know, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I think very much what his Vietnam experience came back as a result of paying witness. And, you know, it wasn't just the photographers who were on the scene, but I think we did suffer the largest amount of traumatic moments than anybody. But there are editors back in offices who were looking through thousands of pictures who weren't smelling the smells and who weren't walking amongst the body parts, but indeed were transported down to ground zero through looking at thousands and thousands of images. Videotape editors. I had an assignment desk person who was normally a pretty cold, uncaring individual who later said, I can't believe that I was probably sending some of my staff to their death by covering this story.
he's leaving the big part out that he almost died on September 11th and has, how many rods in your legs to support them now?
Maybe just a couple.
Just a couple.
But, yeah, you know, what's very, very interesting, after September 11th, I kind of became the poster child for journalists in trauma. And I would suggest that
Emphasis on the child, by the way.
there were many, many journalists who were affected that day that did not have a physical injury. I had a shattered leg, I had burns, I had some breathing issues, but I was treated way, way differently than somebody who paid witness to this and is waking up screaming still 15 years later in the middle of the night. David was hurt down there, and I would suggest again that there were many journalists, as there were civilians, who were hurt down there that day, but their wounds are emotional, not physical.
I concur a lot with that. It's really been something. We're going on 15 years now. At the 10th anniversary, I was besieged by radio and TV people and journalists who wanted to talk about September 11th and my experiences there. And that all trailed off. It started with the first three years, and then it went away. And I'm just wondering about, now we're coming on the 15th anniversary. It started on one of those milestones. Then it's going to come around again. I'm sure you had the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of this, you know, makes me wonder how we, as the group who usually goes and seeks out the survivor after the first anniversary of the Columbine massacre or the 5th anniversary of the war in, in the Middle East, how we treat the subjects who we're going to interview. I think that's as important as how we take care of ourselves and how we take care of each other. It's very, very important. We deal with lots of people with press agents, with PR people, who have gatekeepers who can run interference for them when they don't want to talk to us. Conversely, they have the same gatekeepers that can draw us in and bring us to a press conference when they want to talk to us. But the folks whose door that we knock on because their kid got run over by a tractor trailer on Main Street, or who just lost a parent in a drug shootout that they had nothing to do with, I think it's really crucial that we treat them very ethically, very responsibly, and treat them as we'd like to be treated ourselves when it comes to knocking on their door and interviewing them.
And with that, I think I'd like to start my presentation. Sorry, David? Thank you.